80% of your wages go straight to your brother, Mom said, her tone cold and rehearsed, as if she were reciting a policy she drafted just for me. The other 20? That's mine. Clear enough. She stood with her arms folded, chin lifted, daring me to challenge her. The kitchen felt smaller than usual, the air dense and pressing in, as though the walls themselves were leaning closer to catch my reaction. I lowered my mug to the counter carefully, letting the silence stretch until it started to cut. Then I rose, slid on my jacket one arm at a time, and finally looked her in the eye. Here's clearer, I said. I'm leaving. You won't see another cent, figure it out yourself. Her expression didn't break right away. It sharpened instead, like glass under stress, like a sky seconds before it splits open into thunder. At the table, my brother shifted uneasily, eyes fixed on the floor like a kid caught holding candy he hadn't paid for. I didn't pack much, just the bag I'd stashed by the door weeks ago for exactly this moment. Because I'd known. Winter air stung my face as soon as I stepped outside, and the sound of my boots crunching on the driveway became the only goodbye I offered. By the time I reached my car, her voice was spilling out the front door, muffled, the edge gone, panic creeping in where command had been. I didn't look back. If life has taught me anything, it's that some people only understand silence when it's accompanied by absence. That night, and the night after, I ignored her calls. The missed notifications stacked like bricks on my phone, one after another, evidence of a fortress she couldn't breach anymore. 3 towns away, in a bleach-scented motel with burned coffee air, I finally exhaled. The key they handed me felt heavier than the one to my old bedroom had ever been. The first days were strange in their quiet. No footsteps outside my door. No barked instructions from the kitchen. No constant reminder that my paycheck was never truly mine. Quiet, though, has a way of sharpening into clarity. And in that clarity, I began to calculate. Over a year of paycheck stripped bare, thousands funneled away under the banner of family duty. I had enough to scrape by, but I wanted more than survival. I wanted freedom loud enough for them to hear from miles away. I picked up extra shifts, found a roommate who paid her half on time, opened a bank account Mom would never know existed. Weeks passed. Then one morning, a message buzzed through. The power's been cut. Can you help? Just for now. I stared at it a long time, replaying every moment she told me I owed her, every time my own needs had been labeled selfish. Instead of replying, I took a screenshot, dropped it into a folder I titled Receipts, and went back to work. Because something told me this was only the beginning. And when the ending came, I wanted every word saved. Sometimes the best revenge isn't cutting someone off clean. It's letting them taste, drop by drop, what life is like without you. 2 weeks later, the texts became voicemails. First her voice was sharp again, accusing me of immaturity. Then it softened to pleading. By the 4th message, she was crying not because she missed me, but because the water had been shut off too. I listened to each one once, saved them, never called back. Every time her name lit up my screen, it was another reminder that her grip had finally slipped. I built a new rhythm. Work. Home. Peace. No guilt in the air. No one keeping a running tally of what I owed. The money I kept wasn't just numbers anymore. It was proof. Proof I could stand upright on my own. Then my brother called. I nearly ignored it, but curiosity won. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard. They're talking about selling the house, he said. It's bad, Marissa. She thought you'd step in. You always did before. That last part made me smile, not happily, but in recognition. Yes, I always had. That's why they assumed I always would. I didn't tell him I already knew about the mortgage, that the bank had filed its first notice weeks ago. Instead, I said, I'm sorry you're dealing with that, and let silence fill the line. He waited for me to offer something, money, advice, rescue. I offered nothing. When we hung up, I sat for a long time, listening to the hum of my refrigerator. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was quieter than that. A steady sense that, for the first time, they were living inside the reality they'd built. The next plea didn't arrive on my phone. It came by mail. A plain white envelope, my mother's handwriting. No return address needed. Inside, one sheet of paper. No greeting. No signature. Just, we're losing the house. I know you're angry, but this is your family. We need $19,400 to catch up. We'll pay you back. I read it twice, folded it neatly, slid it into the folder with the screenshots and voicemails. Receipts, every last one. They thought numbers on a page might sway me, that the weight of their need would drag me back. But my answer had been decided months ago in that kitchen when she claimed my paycheck like it was her birthright. Still, an idea had begun to bloom. If the house was going to be sold, someone would buy it. And if that someone was me, I could make sure they never stepped foot inside it again. I didn't act in haste. Instead, I started combing through every detail I could find: foreclosure timelines, auction calendars, bidding procedures, anything that could transform what they thought was their grasp on power into my quiet reclaiming. At work, I signed up for extra shifts, not out of immediate need, but because it felt important that every dollar used for this plan came from me alone. No scraps of theirs, no fingerprints, but mine. By the week's end, I had a strategy not to rescue them, not to shield them from the fallout, but to ensure the ending of this story belonged entirely to me. I slid the letter back into its envelope, taped it shut, and in thick black ink wrote one word across the front: noted. I buried it at the bottom of my desk drawer, a seed of memory I'd keep until the day I needed to remind myself why I was doing what came next. The auction was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. No family drama, no teary pleas, just figures, paddles, signatures. I arrived early, hair tied in a low bun, blazer plain enough to make me fade into the background. No one gave me a second glance. When the screen lit up with the property list, my eyes locked immediately on the address etched into me like muscle memory. That house, the one I had funded but never truly owned. The kitchen where my efforts were dismissed as theirs to claim. The bidding began modest. I waited, motionless, as the numbers rose. When the pace slowed, when hesitation began to ripple through the crowd, I raised my paddle once. A man across the aisle countered. I didn't falter. Again and again, I lifted my hand with steady resolve. It became a rhythm, his pause my certainty, until finally the auctioneer's call cracked the air. Sold. Gavel down. By noon, the deed bore my name. Mine alone. No co-owners. No hidden clause reaching for control. No pathway for it to slip back into their grip. As I stepped outside with the folder tucked under my arm, sunlight poured over me, and for the first time it felt like I was holding the title to freedom itself. That evening, I drove past the house. The lights glowed in the living room, shadows shifting behind curtains. They had no idea yet, but they would. And when the realization came, I wasn't going to sneer or shout. I would simply deliver truth, the same way they once handed me my belongings, as if I were disposable. 3 days later, the call came. First, a photo buzzed onto my phone from an unknown number. The front door, plastered with a bright red notice. Change of ownership. Vacate by month's end. Before I could type a reply, my mother's name flashed across the screen. I answered on the third ring. "It's you," she said, accusation not question. "Yes," I replied evenly. Her words tumbled in a rush. "You can't do this, Marissa. We're your family. We cared for you." I nearly laughed. "You took from me," I said. "There's a difference." Silence. Just her breathing, ragged. "What do you want?" she finally asked. I had asked myself that same thing for weeks. The answer had never been about money. It was this moment, her recognition that she no longer owned a piece of me. "I want you out," I said, calm as stone. "By the end of the month." After that, the locks change. On the other end, a sound, choked, half fury, half grief. "You'll regret this." But regret was what I'd lived in under that roof. Regret was every dawn I woke only to trade my hours for their comfort, while they stripped me of my worth. This was liberation. When I ended the call, I saved the recording. Not for evidence, not out of spite, but because one day I might want to replay it to remember exactly what freedom sounds like. The final week slid by faster than expected. Each time I drove past, the house transformed. Stacks of boxes on the porch. Furniture leaned against rails. Their departure happening in silence. No raised voices. No laughter spilling from windows. Just absence. On Thursday, I parked across the street. Watched. My brother emerged, carrying a lamp I'd bought years ago, back when my paycheck existed to cushion their lives. My sister slammed her trunk, her glare sharp enough to cut, but she didn't meet my eyes. Then my mother appeared in the doorway. She didn't move forward. She just stood there, keys dangling from her hand, staring at them like they were the last tether binding her to this place. For a heartbeat, I wondered if she would cross the street. Try one last bargain. Offer soft words to erase years of taking. She didn't. She vanished back inside, re-emerging only with another box. By Friday evening, the house was hollow. I crossed the front gate, gravel crunching underfoot. The air smelled different, emptier, carrying a weight of possibility. I stood in the driveway, the very ground where she once decreed that my earnings were hers to dictate, and marveled at how quiet reclaiming could be. No screams, no violence, just ownership. The locksmith came the next morning. Crisp air stung my lungs as his tools clicked and turned. Each metallic shift sounded like a chapter sealing shut. When he handed me the new keys, they felt heavier than metal, laden with history, with closure. Inside, the house echoed differently now. The rooms no longer held arguments. The silence felt lighter, like the walls themselves had been scrubbed of expectation. In the kitchen, I paused. The spot where she'd once stood with folded arms, laying out how every paycheck of mine would be carved for everyone but me. Now, there was no one left to dictate. No one but me. On the counter, I placed an envelope. Inside, a copy of the deed. My name in stark black ink. On the front, I scrawled one sentence. The bills are yours now. No signature. No explanations. Just fact. I stepped outside, turned the lock behind me, and let the keys rest in my hand a moment longer before sliding them into my pocket. The sun warmed my face as I walked down the driveway. Years ago, I had walked down this same path with nothing. Today, I wasn't leaving. I was arriving, stepping into a life wholly mine. And that is what made this victory complete. Because revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, legal, and absolute. Sometimes it's the calm act of reclaiming what was stolen, not to hurt them, but to free yourself. Marissa didn't need to shout, beg, or prove her value. She removed herself from their grasp, built her independence in silence, and let them face the weight of their own choices. Buying the house wasn't about property. It was about transforming the very stage of her captivity into a monument of her independence. This story is proof. Revenge can be deliberate, measured, and final. Not cruel, not loud, just undeniable. If you've ever been drained, undervalued, or told you owe more to those who only take, remember this: your boundaries are not selfish. Your achievements don't require their blessing. And sometimes the most poetic justice is standing where they once told you that you didn't belong, staying there, unshaken on your own terms,